The Wargaming rules, O Group, by David Brown, are based on Second World War offensive doctrines that were issued as training pamphlets to the armies involved in the Second World War. Some of these are available online, and it's worth reading them to get an idea and flavour of the period that the O Group rules cover. To newcomers, the game can seem a bit like a grind forward with inconclusive firefights that don't allow the companies to progress on their objectives. However, there are certain tactics that were taught in the Second World War that will help a new player achieve victory in the game. And in this video, we're going to look at companies attacking and how best to handle them. We'll be referencing the US Field Manual FM 710 Rifle Company Infantry Regiment, published in March 1944. I'll put a link to a PDF copy in the video description below so you can take a look at the pamphlet yourself. In this video, we'll mostly be using Chapter 2, Section 3, The Attack, but the rest of the pamphlet is also of interest for those who play Second World War war games. In the Second World War, the company was a cohesive unit made up of usually 3 platoons with around 40 men, including commanders. Each platoon then had 3 or 4 sections of around 10 men, so at a full strength a company could be around 120 to 140 men. In O Group game terms, the platoon is the smallest battlefield unit, and these will operate independently but are under the overall commander of the company commander, and therefore fall within his company area. There's more details about this in my previous video on company areas and phase lines, and again I'll put a link in the description below for that video. However, what this means in practical terms is that each company in O Group has 3 basic moving parts, being the 3 individual platoons. Knowing how to use these 3 parts together will be key to success in the game, just as on the real life battlefield. First of all, let's turn to the supports that are available for companies before we address the attack proper. So a company is not just made up of infantry, and in O Group you can attach heavy weapons to the platoons within the company, or the company may also be augmented by individual and discrete heavy weapons sections which will operate alone. This is entirely the player's choice, and both approaches have their pros and cons. Heavy weapons sections can be attached to individual platoons to bolster firepower or also to provide anti-tank punch. For example, when a medium machine gun is attached to a platoon, its range is reduced from 30 inches to 14 inches, but it allows for missed shots to be re-rolled, up to 3 times. This is dependent on how many sections are actually in the platoon. Whilst this reduces the effective range of the weapon, it does allow for a flexible base of fire that is useful in the attack. On the other hand, an individual MMG section is brittle, and it can be easily overrun by a close assault. However, it can then use its range to stay out of small arms fire while still providing fire support to the rest of the company. Keeping it in cover and away from the enemy is key in an individual MMG section's successful use on the battlefield. One more thing to note with attachments is that having heavy weapons operating as discrete sections will require the use of more orders to operate them, using more of your precious command. So both methods of deploying the MMGs have positives and negatives, and how you use your attachments will depend very much on how you are playing, i.e. defensively or offensively, and what you will want to achieve in the game. In simple terms, from a defensive point of view, an individual heavy weapons section may give you more flexibility for your defence line, but in the attack, they provide support directly to a platoon and help them fight forward at the spear point. Okay, so now we understand what companies comprises of and what weapons can be used to support an attack, so we can start to think about how we use those separate parts on the battlefield to overwhelm the enemy. As mentioned at the start, attacking pell-mell will yield little success and will quickly tire out an attacking force until it is spent with multiple shock on the platoons. You will find you end up spending orders just to reduce shock rather than actually continue in the advance. We need to reduce this outcome as much as possible, so we turn to the old military adage of find, fix, flank and finish. Basically, this translates into locating the enemy, fixing him in place with firepower, exploiting the weakness of their flank, and then moving in to destroy them. There is also the old idea that it takes a ratio of at least 3 to 1 to successfully destroy an enemy, and this is also pertinent here. Your company consists of 3 platoons, so use those 3 to destroy an individual enemy platoon. Bringing the firepower of 3 onto 1 will ensure that you are able to destroy them as a threat. Another important aspect to keep in mind is that victory in O Group is also brought about by causing 3 foobarrs on the enemy in a normal game. Every 4 sections lost will cause a foobar, So if a platoon comprises 3 sections, finishing it is 3/4 of the way to 1 foobar. Destroy 2 enemy platoons and you are halfway to victory with 6 of the 12 elements required having been destroyed. But destroying the opponent isn't as simple as ganging up on him, as they also get a vote and they will be actively seeking to stop you. However, we can turn to the Second World War tactics to gain an upper hand. In FM 710, we are told assistance by fire and manoeuvre is usually more effective than assistance by fire only. In layman's terms, this means the company should advance together in a mutually supporting way, rather than as individual platoons. This will allow for having interlocking fields of fire as the units move forward. As infantry units have a 90-degree arc of fire to their front, this means remaining close together, but not too close to be affected by enemy artillery. Some thought will have to be put into your advance, which will keep the platoons separate but not isolated while maximising the available cover. Even if it is a slow advance to retain mutual support, that is infinitely better than being destroyed piecemeal by a well-placed enemy. Remember that tempo is also incredibly important here. Tempo, in the military sense, doesn't mean going fast. It can also mean going slow, but it means maintaining a steady pace towards your ultimate goal, be that the scenario objective or just clearing a single defensive strongpoint. Allowing a unit to become hesitant or suppressed will affect your company's ability to fight overall, which in turn affects your tempo, so avoid this as much as possible and be wary of units taking too much shock. It is worthwhile pausing the advance to rally and then continue if your units are taking any kind of enemy fire. It is impossible in the infinite varieties of wargaming tables to give any definite examples here, but the principles should be considered by the gamer when advancing on enemy units. This will also help out the find part of the 4Fs, by flushing out the enemy, either by making him deploy his defence units or ambush units as you advance on their lines. This can be done with either the platoons on the tabletop or with combat patrols, or a combination of both. There are pros and cons to either method, and this video is not long enough to discuss them here, only to say that combat patrols can be used to confuse the enemy as to where the actual attack may fall. For now, we'll just look at units that are deployed and take a proper look at combat patrols in a future video. The second of the 4Fs is fix. Once the enemy has made himself known, in this instance, let's say he has deployed a platoon to hold the farm. The American player was hoping to use the farm as a consolidation point to bring forward his 3rd company, so unfortunately we can't just ignore it and go around. The enemy is going to have to be dislodged. This presents a problem, as firing into buildings is at a reduced effect, and we have to be able to move to engage him, further reducing the effectiveness of our fire. Using a single platoon against this objective is only going to end in failure, even if you are lucky enough to cause some shock on the enemy. They will still have the upper hand. We need to stack the odds in our favour. Using the entire company, we can begin to manoeuvre into such a position that the 3 platoons are able to bring fire down on the target. The enemy will only be able to fire at one of your platoons in response, whilst you should have the firepower of 3. Here you are seeking to cause as much shock on the enemy as possible in the first instance. The platoon's firepower can also be augmented by using the battalion mortars or the artillery. However, there's always a chance that artillery does not arrive, so mortars may be the better option here as they are guaranteed to be available. Ensure that your forward observer is also in a good position to spot potential targets. Whatever else you can throw into the mix is always useful, and to return to the support weapons, having a medium machine gun attached to one of the platoons here is a bonus, as you'll be able to reroll firing dice. That said, in this situation, the chance of you actually destroying the enemy is quite slim, due to them being in buildings and probably at full strength when you first encounter them, but causing shock on them is enough for now. Shock reduces their capacity for fighting and also fixes them in place, so you're really looking to suppress them for the time being. In most cases, destroying an enemy by firepower alone is difficult in O Group, simply because you have to spot them, then you have to hit them, and even then they get a saving roll. It can be a slow grind if you just use small arms to shift an enemy, by which time they may have brought up reinforcements or spent orders rallying the men in the firing line. You must move quickly, and this is where the flank and finish parts come into play. So let's see our example of the 3 platoons attacking a single enemy platoon in the farm. In the first turn of contact, the 3 friendly platoons laid down fire and mortars, causing the enemy to shock. This has then caused them to become hesitant. This has cost 2 orders for the mortar, as it's a new target, and then 3 orders for the platoon's firing. If we move our company commander forward in the regroup phase, we have spent 5 orders in total on this attack. However, in the enemy's turn, they were able to reduce their shock to 1 through a rally order, and then they returned fire. Now it's the second turn of the attack. The forward observer calls another mortar strike. This only costs 1 order, as it has been a second shot on the same target, and it results in a shock causing the defenders to become hesitant once again. Then, using 2 orders, the other 2 platoons open fire on the farm again, causing a third shock and suppressing the defenders. We're doing this with the MMG in support. The time is now ripe for finishing. The third platoon moves in to get into a position on the flank of the farmhouse, and this is out of the arc of fire of the defending platoon. By doing this, we are ensuring we can close on the position. As the attackers are American, they also have the option of using marching fire. This allows them to fire before moving, but it may mean that they only move 6 inches maximum, so it may be worthwhile foregoing this just to ensure they reach their intended position. This will cost them 1 order, and they are now readying themselves for an opportunity to close assault. At this point, time is of the essence. Waiting for another turn will allow the enemy to either reduce their shock, bring forward reinforcements, or even just to move out of the danger zone. This is the crucial time to use your company commander order. A company commander order allows for a previously activated unit to activate again, but it can be expensive, costing up to 3 orders. This can be off-putting to a new player. However, if used exactly at the point of impact, they can have a devastating result. So in our example, we have a suppressed enemy and a unit on the flank ready to strike. This is the perfect opportunity for using that company commander order. This will cost 1 order for the close assault plus any extra orders depending on the die roll. In this case we rolled a 5, and having a first rate battalion means 1 extra order, so it's 2 in total, a total of 6 orders spent. Don't forget that some of these orders can also come from your HQ dice as well. Although the farm built up area means that the enemy have no flanks, they are suppressed and they will fight at 1 dice per section. Even with the reduction of 1 dice for the attackers going into a built up area, the odds are stacked in our favour. The attackers also get to fire as they go in, so if the enemy is hit by the attacker's fire and fail their save, it's an automatic KIA roll due to them being suppressed. 2 of these failures and 1 section is automatically destroyed. On top of this, in close assault, all the hits count and there is no save roll, so the attack only needs to cause 4 hits of their 5 dice to destroy 2 sections with automatic KIAs. Don't forget that this is already halfway to a foobar. They also have the potential to kill all 3 sections, with an extra KIA roll if the 5th dice resulted in a hit. The worst results the attackers can expect is to be suppressed if all 3 of the enemy dice hit. The worst overall outcome is that the enemy survives and wins, but the odds are in the attacker's favour in this situation, with the probable result for the defender either being their destruction or being pushed out of the farm. They would still be suppressed, and they're also not in cover. Another thing to note is that if the enemy is reduced to a single section, they must pass a platoon route morale test, or use a company commander order, or become dispersed. However, don't forget that the enemy still gets a vote, and they can elect to withdraw before the assault goes in. They will need to roll a 4+ on a d6 to do so, and if they do, they also gain a shock and they give up their cover. So it's not a great situation for the defender, no matter how they look at it. Obviously this is an isolated situation and it depends very much on what the enemy does. However, your company is not isolated, and there should be at least one other company on the tabletop, and they should be used in a supporting role elsewhere by harassing the enemy and forcing him to use his precious orders to deal with them, whilst you concentrate your spear point against a particular area on the tabletop. A second company can be used as a feint to attack on the flank in an effort to confuse the enemy, but that's worthy of a video of its own. So, using this as an example, hopefully this video has demonstrated that using period tactics of manoeuvre, the concentration of firepower and a final assault is enough to destroy an enemy platoon and begin forcing those all-important foobars on them. Choose your target, choose your approach, and punch through their defence line to victory. As I said, this is all covered in the training manuals of the period, so they're well worth reading even if just as an interesting reference point for fighting war games in the Second World War. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it and you haven't subscribed, please do so, as I have a lot of other O Group videos on the channel.